cheers. It is time for me to chug my 32 ounces of celery juice. Oh, that last sip is so terrible. Everything else is fine. It's just the last sip. I'm like, ugh. Okay. Whew, now we got that done. I'm still kind of sleepy. I didn't sleep very good last night. And it's a little after 6 o'clock, but it's okay. We're gonna wake up and it's gonna be a good day today. Okay, so for breakfast this morning, I'm going to have watermelon, which is my favorite fruit of all time. And it's cold, which means I'm gonna be cold because I always get so freezing after I eat watermelon. So I'm gonna go put on a jacket and I'm gonna go sit somewhere, maybe outside, maybe inside, I don't know. Sit outside and eat this watermelon. So I figured in this What I Eat video today, I would walk you through my food pyramid. So I'm gonna walk you through basically the foods that I like to focus on for my primary calorie sources. And my food pyramid is different from your typical food pyramid that you're gonna see in the dieting industry. Especially if you're new here and you're new to this channel, you are gonna probably be surprised by some of the things that I put on my food pyramid and the foods that I like to focus on. And as we talk about this pyramid today, I'm gonna be discussing like the primary calorie sources. So these are gonna be foods that I get my primary calories from. All right, so at the very bottom of my food pyramid, my number one source of calories that I like to focus on the most is fruit. So I like to make whole, fresh fruit my primary source of calories. This is what I focus on the most throughout the day. And one of the main reasons for this is because fruit has a lot of water and fiber. It gives you a lot of bulk without a lot of extra calories. So it's giving you enough calories to feel satiated and satisfied, but because it's coming with that extra water content and the fiber and the bulk, it helps you to feel more full and satiated. So you're actually able to eat without having to count calories, without having to worry about portion control, because your body is able to naturally regulate itself. And I don't know about you, but that is exactly what I want. I don't want to have to try to like weigh and measure and track and count and make sure that everything's like all proportioned correctly. That way I can make sure that I'm able to maintain my weight and all of that stuff. I just want to be able to eat when I'm hungry and stop when I'm full. And when you're eating fruit, that's one of, there's others, but that's the main one of the best foods in terms of just being able to eat and follow your body's natural hunger and fullness cues. Eating fresh, whole, ripe fruit. It's 11 o'clock and I'm going to have some mangoes. These are Kent mangoes, and they are kind of going bad on me. So I'm gonna go and cut these up, and this will be my lunch for the day. Kind of an early lunch, honestly, because it is still early. Let's go ahead and cut up these mangoes. Oh gosh, this looks really pale yellow. I think it's gonna be a good one. Ooh, this does not look good at all. But it already had a black spot, so what do? You know, you gotta peel it. It looks pretty pale. Okay, let's do a sample. What a pleasant surprise. It's actually very good. Wow, that makes me happy. Cool. Nothing like a good ripe fruit. Bear is on the ground just like waiting for anything to drop, and it's gone. It's history. Ew. This is not looking like a good one at all. I don't know what this mango's got, like some kind of freaking disease. Here's my big bowl of mangoes. It's time for me to go sit down and enjoy these babies. All right, so now let's look at the second part of my food pyramid here. Now, this is going to be the food that I focus on the second most in terms of calories. So it's not my primary source of calories, but it is one that is still a great go-to. I just don't consider it as optimal as fruit, but it's still a wonderful, awesome, amazing choice. And that is your starchy vegetables. So when it comes to things like sweet potato, your regular golden potatoes, russet potatoes, your winter squash, your pumpkin, your yellow squash, things like that, all of those are considered starchy vegetables, and those are a great source of calories. So to me, I just think of it like sort of common sense. Like when you think of like the healthiest foods, like what do you think of right off the top of your head when you think of like healthy foods? Fruits and vegetables, right? Fruits and vegetables. And so that's why I like to make fruits and vegetables my like main go-to calorie sources. If you make starchy vegetables one of your primary calorie sources over here, then you're gonna be able to get enough calories and get enough bulk to help you feel full, satiated, and satisfied. It's a win-win-win. So you're not having to constantly portion control and count calories, worry about macros and all this stuff when you're eating your fruits and your starchy vegetables primarily. And so if you're seeing this food pyramid and you're like, Paige, there is no way that I can eat fruit. Either I just can't afford it, I don't live in an area where there's a lot of fruit, maybe you really work in a high pressure job where you have to go really long hours and you can't sustain it eating a fruit-based diet because fruit you might have to eat more frequently. If that's the case, then starchy vegetables are definitely going to be a win. If that's the case, then your food pyramid is probably going to look a bit more like this. So you aren't going to have as much fruit, but you can make your food pyramid more of the starchy vegetables as the base, but still include as much fruit as you can because it is just so good for the body. You're getting vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, phytonutrients. It's antibacterial, antiviral, antifungal. The whole package, right? Fruit is the whole package. But your second best option is the starchy vegetables like your potatoes, which is why I have included them more toward the bottom part of my food pyramid. And when it comes to including more starchy vegetables into your diet, I want to put your fears at rest if you are a bit skeptical about eating more potatoes and starchy vegetables, because I know that those have kind of been like scary foods, especially in the dieting industry. They're like, oh, don't eat those kind of things because they're going to make you gain weight, and you hear all that stuff all the time. But all over the world, there's these spots called blue zones. And in the blue zones, you have people who live not only to be, in their 90s, reach 100 years old. You have these elderly people who are still moving and shaking and doing their thing. They don't have all of the health issues that people in the Western diet have, the standard American diet. They don't have like the diabetes, the heart disease, the cardiovascular disease, all of this type of stuff. They don't have that in these blue zones. Why is that? It's because they're eating plant-based foods, low-fat plant-based foods, and a lot of these blue zones focus heavily on starchy vegetables like potatoes. There was one blue zone, I think it was, I don't remember which one in particular, but they included like 80 different varieties of potatoes, and that was like the majority of their diet was potatoes. So don't be afraid of your starchy vegetables like your potatoes, even your white potatoes like your russet potatoes, golden potatoes, all great options. For my snack today, I'm gonna have grapes. So I've got some cotton candy grapes here, and then I've just got some regular old green grapes. And pro tip for you, if you like grapes as much as me, whenever they're like really firm, that means that they are gonna be sweet and ripe and delicious. So if you're in the grocery store, if they feel like a nice firm grape, that is a good sign. So let's go ahead and I'm gonna wash these and then we'll eat. And now for the third part of our food pyramid, the food that's not quite as good as starchy vegetables and not quite as good as the fruit is going to be your legumes and your gluten-free whole grains. That's going to be the third portion of our food pyramid. And you'll notice that I just wrote grains in there because I couldn't fit gluten-free whole grains all in this one little square, but it is better to focus on your gluten-free whole grains than the ones that contain gluten. So instead of having like wheat, you would probably want to opt for like your millet, oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice. All of those types of grains are going to be gluten-free whole grains, and that's what I like to focus on. If I'm going to have a grain, I want to have a gluten-free one. And then of course you have your legumes, so your lentils, your beans, things like that, your typical, legumes that you might think of. That's what you would include there as well. So your legumes, your gluten-free whole grains, still great options, like still nice high carb, low fat, good options. I just don't consider them to be as optimal as starchy vegetables, and I don't consider the starchy vegetables to be as optimal as just your good, whole, fresh, ripe, raw fruit. So that's sort of like the order of my main calories that I focus on. Okay, so when it does come to your whole grains, here I've got oatmeal, and I also really like having these brown rice noodles. I have these a lot. These are brown rice noodles, so I'll include these. I say a lot, once again, you know, maybe 1 to 2 times a week, something like that. So I will have those types of things. But now I will tell you that there was a time when I was plant-based several years ago when I was eating a lot more whole grains. Like, I mean, I would wake up in the morning and I would have oatmeal for breakfast. I would have like this type of pasta. I have another pasta up here. I would have like this pasta. Now I still include this pasta. This is like tinkyata. It's a brown rice pasta. So I still eat this, but just not as much. So there was a time back when I was first being plant-based, I would have a lot of the oatmeal for breakfast, the pasta for lunch, and maybe potatoes for dinner, but typically even like more pasta again for dinner or another whole grain for dinner, which whole grains are fine. It's just that I did have more cellulite back then. I was a bit thicker as well. I didn't weigh myself back then, which honestly, looking back, I actually wish I did, because then I would actually have results to share with you guys. So I didn't actually weigh myself, but I did feel, you know, just thicker in general, and I for sure had cellulite. I know that because I could just see it on myself. And so I just did not feel like my results were as good as they are just being able to eat fruit and focusing on my starchy vegetables. I just feel like that just works a lot better for me. And especially, it just helps me to feel more full, satiated, and satisfied. Because once again, this food pyramid actually also follows the food density. Like, so if you look at like a food density chart or something like that, it's gonna look the same. Like, look at this. You know, the most calorie dense foods on this chart so far are gonna be your legumes, your gluten-free whole grains, second your starchy vegetables, and then lastly your fruit. So this food pyramid naturally follows sort of the guidelines of calorie density, meaning that the least dense foods are at the bottom and the more dense foods, more calorie dense foods are at the top. Now that being said, I still think whole grains are a good option. I still think legumes are a good option. I still think all that stuff are good options. But when you start getting into like the whole grain territory, you start getting into stuff like this, bread. And now I don't eat whole grain bread because this is not gluten-free. This is not gluten-free, I don't think. So this is a whole grain bread, but it's not gluten-free, and I try to stay away from the gluten type stuff. So if I'm gonna have a bread, I'm gonna make my own gluten-free or something like that. But the thing when you start including more grains, like with this third rung of the pyramid, when you start including more grains, you start getting into the breads, you start getting into the cupcakes and the cakes and the cookies and the crackers and all these sort of processed foods, which are okay, but they can be more addicting. So you just kind of have to be like mindful of that sort of thing. Because as you start including more of those processed foods, you might find yourself having a hard time recognizing your body's hunger and fullness cues. And so you have to just kind of be mindful of that. So now let's look at the food at the very top of this food pyramid. This is the food that I eat the least of. And that is going to be fat. So my plant-based fats, things like the avocados, the nut butters, the seeds, the coconut, all of that kind of thing, very calorie dense, not very satiating and satisfying. So I try to keep that kind of thing to a minimum. And I have other reasons for keeping this to a minimum besides just the calorie density factor. The thing is like your body's primary fuel source is not fat. It is carbohydrates. That's what every cell in your body thrives on, is carbohydrates. And so if you are eating a lot of fruit and starchy vegetables, what's happening is you're gonna have all of this sugar that's entering into your body, entering into your bloodstream. And when I say sugar, it's whole natural sugar, right? The best form of sugar. Sugar is a great thing. We want sugar, but we want it in the form of fruit, your starchy vegetables, that naturally occurring sugar in the fruit, not the processed, white, refined junk food. That's not the kind of sugar that we want in our body, right? But this whole natural sugar, we want that. So when you eat your fruits and your starchy vegetables, you're gonna have all of this whole natural sugar that's being assimilated into the bloodstream, right? Well, that sugar has to go somewhere. That sugar is trying to get into the cells. But when you eat a lot of fat and you have a high fat diet, what's happening is that fat is blocking the sugar from getting into the cells. And so that's why when people have a high fat diet and they start eating a lot of carbohydrates, they get insulin resistance, diabetes, and all of these like negative health issues, and they want to blame the sugar, but the sugar is just trying to do its thing, right? Its job is being blocked, It can't do what it wants to do because that fat is there blocking it from getting into the cells, right? So if we lower the fat intake, then that gets rid of the problem. That stops the issue entirely when we keep our fat intake low. And so that's one of the reasons why I like to keep my fat intake low. And another thing is fat takes a lot longer to digest, whereas fruit digests very quick. Starchy vegetables, also very easy on the digestive system. Fat, not so much. On top of that, fat is harder for the liver. Again, the liver has to work really hard to get that fat all cleaned up. But with fruit and starchy vegetables, not the case. It's very easy on the liver. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have your healthy fats ever, because obviously you've got your avocados, you've got, peanut butter. I still include peanut butter in my sauces and things like that. So you can still include your healthy fats. It's just that they can add up so quick, because once again, when we talk about the calorie density, guess what the most calorie dense food on this pyramid is? The fat, up here at the top. Like, you can think you're eating a low fat diet when really you might be eating a very high fat diet. So for that reason, I like to actually measure and weigh my fat and how much fat I'm having. Now at this point, I really don't even really need to, because I know that typically this avocado has about 15 grams of fat. That's my fat for the day. Or 2 tablespoons of this is 16 grams of fat. So I'll typically have like 1 tablespoon in a sauce or something like that. So I just know by heart, because I've done this for a really long time. But if you're just like now getting into this and you don't even know like what fat grams are, and you don't even know like what fat is in what foods, and you might just want to like track and count those fat grams, because it is going to keep you more accountable for the foods that you're actually eating.
Now for dinner, I'm going to be having a brown rice vegetable sushi. So I've got some brown rice there that I've already made ahead of time, and I'm just going to place some avocado, some cucumber, some carrot into my little sushi roll there, and then roll it up. And that's what I'm going to have for dinner this evening, along with a big leafy green salad. I've also got some coconut aminos and some wasabi that I'm going to use along with that. And if you like this video, click the video on the screen. This is another video that I think you'll enjoy, and I will see you there.